In our Shepherd's Bookshelf podcast number 5, this is our 5th one now. So far we've been kind of setting the stage of the importance of reading and how to read and so forth. We're going to begin now to start looking at books week by week that we'd recommend or we can review. Some of these we might challenge, but for the most part we want to give you some good things to look at, some good books. And I thought as we begin the actual recommending various books to read, that we'd start off with the subject of God. But as I began to look over what I have read over the last several years on God, I found that for the most part I've been looking at books concerning debates and challenges and some of the minutiae of who God is. Some things that probably a lot of you wouldn't be interested in, maybe some of you would be. So this week we are going to look at some of those kind of books on at least one particular topic. And then next week, we're going to turn to God himself and some very classic books on God that I think you will enjoy. And if you've never read them, you would very much appreciate them. And even if you have read them, you might go back and reread some of those books. But right now, we're going to look at some of the debates about God himself, the Godhead, and the big debate among conservative evangelicals in the last several years has to do with the subordination of the Son to the Father. So the issue is this. Has Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has he eternally been submissive to the Father's will? Is he eternally submissive to the Father, both in the past and in the future or presently? Is that his role? Is that what he does? Now, for a lot of you, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That isn't something you've thought a whole lot about. And yet, for some very heavy-duty theologians, people who really think these things through, this has become a big deal. Matter of fact, to the point that some have said we're in the process of a civil war over God himself, which is amazing to think that after centuries of the scriptures and the church studying God, talking about God, and so forth, that we're now having this big divide over some details concerning the Godhead. So we're not talking about the Trinity here. No one's denying the Trinity. But how does the Godhead function, especially in this relationship to the Son and with the Father, and the relationship, the functional relationship between them? So as I thought about that, there's two basic camps of books that I have read in recent times over this subject. There are those that call themselves classical theists. Now, the classical theists believe that it's wrong to claim that Jesus is ever, in the past or presently or in the future, has ever been subordinate to the Father, that he's ever been submissive to the will of the Father. Now, some of the key players on this, we start off with some like James Delassalle in All That Is God. He written, and matter of fact, there's a lot of good stuff in these books, even if you don't agree with all the positions taken. But he has the classical Christian theism view and does quite a good job at going through a lot of details in that. Another book is by Glenn Butner. It's The Son Who Learned Obedience. And this also is very similar. He says the theological case against the eternal submission of the Son. So he's going directly into this debate and supporting his position that the Son is not eternally submissive to the Father. Probably one of the more powerful books in this regard is Matthew Barrett's Simply Trinity. So Barrett is one of the leading charges in this debate. He teaches what he calls the great tradition, going back to the ancient fathers to see what they had to say. And he says we'll learn a great deal about the Godhead by turning back to the ancient Christian church fathers who in his opinion, had it nailed down very well. And some today are departing from the ancient view. This is his concern. And so he has this book on Simply Trinity. So these are three books that you could look at if you want to look at that side of it. Now, on the other side of the aisle, you have some books by, for example, Bruce Ware. Bruce Ware wrote Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Relationship, Roles, and Relevance. This is a relatively easy read, 160 or so pages. dealing with this subject. And he would support a position of the Son willingly subordinating himself to the Father, being submissive to the Father, never in any sense unequal to the Father, never in any sense inferior to the Father, but has an eternal role of submissiveness. He has written it in that book and others as well. But this one here is the Perspectives on the Doctrines of God, 4 views. And he also supports his view about his understanding of God in this book. This one isn't directly about the submissive issue. There's other issues here as well, including the doctrine of the openness of God, which is the idea of, does God even know the future? Can God know the future? And Bruce Ware defends God's omniscience, that God knows the future, but at the same time, he sees a role of the Son in submissiveness to the Father. Another heavy-duty theologian that would take the same position that Ware takes is none other than Wayne Grudem. Now, Grudem, this is his theology book, Systematic Theology. It's a large work dealing with all the theologies. So, but there is a section here on God, of course, and he also takes the same position that Ware would take. So these are some of the views, some of the major theologians who are debating this important issue. So let's go back and look at the principal division between these theologians and how these books line it out. So there's a lot of things to look at, a lot of details that we could address. But if we boil it down to the 2 big ones, the 2 big divides, they would be divided over the issue of simplicity and over the issue of God's will. Let's start with simplicity. That's an attribute of God that not everyone is probably familiar with. Unity is another word for that. And as we deal with the simplicity of God, it's the idea that God cannot be divided into parts. God is not a little bit love, a little bit holiness, a little bit justice, a little bit omniscience, and we put it all together in a package where we have God divided into these different parts. Instead, simplicity teaches that God is one. He's simple. He cannot be parted out. And as a simple God, he's not simple in the sense of how we normally use the word, but he's indivisible. We don't divide God up. So God is not a little piece of his attributes all put together. God is his attributes. He is altogether perfectly love, completely holiness, completely just, and so forth. And so as we look at each of these attributes of God, he is fully those things. We do not divide him up, nor do we say that one of his attributes is better than the other, that holiness is his principal attribute, or love is his key attribute. He's all these things all at once, and you cannot divide him up into different sections. The other, I don't think Ware and these guys disagree with that in particular, but the issue that I think there is bigger division is over the will of God. So Dolezal and these others, Barrett and others would say, look, if there is just one God, and you cannot divide him into parts, and he has one sovereign will, then the Son cannot be subordinate to the Father's will, because that would imply that the Father has a will, the Son has a will, and the Holy Spirit has a will. They don't all particularly agree on everything, but the Son is willing to submit to the will of the Father, and the Spirit is willing to submit to the Father and the Son. And in that sense, there is this submissiveness to the will of God. And those in the classical theism realm see that as very, very wrong and very unbiblical. They do not see that there's any possibility that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit can have separate wills. As one God, the divine God, the simplistic God, the simple God, that is, there cannot be a multiplicity of wills. There's one will, and that will is a will that the Son and the Holy Spirit and the Father all are in perfect agreement with. Ware and some of the others would not agree with that. They would see a voluntary submissiveness on the part of the Son to the will of the Father. This, I think, is the strongest argument for classical theism. it's hard to see how there can be multiplicity of wills if there is one God who is cannot be divided into parts. And so this is the debate. The big sticker for a lot of this is the incarnation, because we know that when the Lord was on the earth as God-man and taking on human form and having a human nature, that he was submissive to the Father. He said, "I will, not my will, but thy will be done." So while he was on earth during the incarnation, he was submissive to the Father's will at that time. So that becomes the sticking point, the difficulty in trying to unravel this. The classical theist would say that was a temporary situation in which the Son was submissive to the Father's will only while he was on the earth during the incarnation, wherein others would say it continues on, and he continues to be eternally submissive, both in eternity past and eternity future, to the will of the Father, and the incarnation was an example of that, although it was different because he was in a humble state as the God-man on the earth. So this is some of the debate going on. These are some of the books, and there's others out there as well that you can pick up and study this if you're interested. I would mention I've written several papers on this called the Battle for God series. You can find this on our website at tottministries.org. And you can get at these 4 or 5 articles that I've written, 5 articles, I guess, that deals with all of this issue and all the various quotes from all these books and others that would give you a good handle on that subject if that's something that interests you and you want to jump into it. Matter of fact, my work might be a good place to start, then move into the deeper studies and deeper books. So these are some books on the Godhead. And as far as the issue concerning the submissiveness of the Son to the Father. As I said, next week we're going to look at something very different. We'll look at some great books that will talk to us about who God is in all of his wonder, and I think you'll be very pleased to think about some of those books with us. So we'll see you next week. I hope you can join us.